Thank you very much, Nicolas, and thank you to all of you for joining us this afternoon for this webinar. First of all, I would like to say I hope that you're all safe and well. We know this is an unprecedented time in history. We also know that this sanitary crisis has led to the lockdown of half of the world's population. This has never been seen before. And this has also forced us to push the pause button for our economy. So our economy is on pause, and we have no idea what is going to happen in the months to come. Our economy is on pause. This means that we'll probably face the biggest recession since World War II. The world trade has almost stopped, and there is a soaring number of unemployed people worldwide where we don't have welfare states. There is also a very big cash pressure on companies, and we know this will lead to another crisis. So maybe we can start with a question here that I have for you. We stopped our economy. We have pressed this pause button on our economy to save lives. And what I would like to know from you, and we can put a little poll up here and start with this poll. I would like to know from you, and for all of you who are connected on Zoom, you can answer those questions. I would like to know from you if this is just another crisis. What do you think? Is this just another crisis and in a couple of months we will go back to normal? Will there be some major changes and will not go back to normal in the coming months? Or maybe you're not really sure, you don't really know, you have no idea, you're uncertain, which is probably the case for all of us. But let's see what you answer to this poll and what most of you are thinking about this situation. Again, the question is, if we push this pause button again, do we go back to normal? Is this just a parenthesis, or is our economy going to come back to normal? Will there be some drastic changes? So I see that a lot of you have voted, probably most of you. So still a couple of seconds to go. For all of you who are not on Zoom, who are on YouTube, I would invite you to just think about this question and see what the others are thinking. So maybe we will stop here and just look at the results and broadcast the results. So as you can see, most of you think, 71% of you think that there will be some major changes in the months to come and that will not go back to normal. 15% of you think this is just another crisis and we'll go back to normal, and about the same amount, about 15%, think that you don't really know, you're not really sure. And so I fully agree with you, with the vast majority of you, with the 71% of you who think that there will be major changes and will not go back to normal. And this is also what is shown in some headlines over the past weeks that we could see. We've seen those headlines. We've seen, for example, the Financial Times saying that coronavirus will change the way the world does business for good. We've seen McKinsey talking about the next normal, or Bain talking about the fact that this is like a dress rehearsal for the new world, or even a French bank, Natixis, saying that maybe this is the end of neoliberal capitalism. So we're pretty sure that there will be a next normal, that we're not going to go back to the world before. And what I would like to show you tonight is to discuss with you the need to reinvent the business model. So let me start by giving you a definition of what we'll call a business model during this hour together. And this is a framework that I have developed with my colleague Hélène Musicas at HEC. And I know there are many of you are former students of ours, and so you will recognize this framework. So what is a business model? And then we'll take you into what needs to change in the months to come. So what is a business model? A business model has three components. The first component of the business model is the answer to the question who and what. And it's what we call the value proposition. The value proposition describes the clients, the products and the services that we're offering to our clients at a given price level. So that's the first component, the value proposition. Who are our customers and what are we offering them? The second component of the business model is the how. How are we organized in order to deliver this product or service in due time to our customer? So this value, this is what we call the value architecture. And the value architecture, again, is the how. And it's both the value chain, so how our supply chain, and the resources and competencies that we need in order to develop and to deliver this value proposition to our customer. And then finally, we have the third component of our business model, which is called the profit equation. And the profit equation is just a financial way of looking at the two previous components. The value proposition will explain how much revenue we generate, and the value architecture explains the level of cost and capital employed. So this is the very basic framework of a business model. And what we want to investigate together this afternoon is how this current crisis will change this business model. So of course, right now, again, I understand that there is a surge for cash. And beyond the search for cash, we can also think about reinventing the business model. So I will take you through the three components: value proposition, value architecture, and profit equation, to see what we could change and what we need to change in the coming months. So first, let's talk about the value proposition. The value proposition, again, refers to our customer. I think that this, again, is an unprecedented crisis, and our customers are people. And people have a very specific relation, I think, to this crisis. Of course, some of you might think that as soon as it's over, people will rush again in shopping malls and buy like before. But I think that there might also be major shifts in behavior on behalf of our customers. Because if we compare this crisis to the 2008 crisis, I think there is a major difference. In 2008, we were afraid maybe for our money, maybe for our jobs. Right now, we are afraid for our lives, for our family, for our parents, for our grandparents. And I think this makes a major difference. People locked down, have time to think, and have time to think about what is of value to them. I think people today realize the difference between what is needed and what is superficial, what we really need and what we can basically live without. And again, this might change and drive major changes in behaviors on behalf of customers. So how can we react to this? How can we get prepared? Well, the first thing we can do is to refocus on something very basic and to refocus on the job to be done. What do we actually offer to our customer? Not in terms of product. What do we allow him or her to do? What is the job that the customer performs with our value proposition? This is a pretty basic question. And if we come back to the idea, this is, we can use this quote by Theodore Levitt. He was a marketing professor 50 years ago at Harvard, and he said that people don't want a quarter-inch drill, they want a quarter-inch hole. This very basic quote nicely leads us to this idea, back to this idea that we need to refocus on the job to be done. What is really needed for our customer? What does he want to achieve? Let me give you another example about this and this idea of how we can think about the job to be done. There are 1 million babies that die every year in the world. And the reason they die the day they're born is because they're cold. And they're cold, so of course this doesn't happen in the developed world because we have incubator and we put our baby in the incubator for 24, 48 hours and the baby is fine. This happens in rural places, in rural Africa, rural India, in places where there are no hospitals and no incubators. So if you want to solve this problem, you take a team of engineers, very lean-minded engineers, and you try to build a very, very cheap incubator to make it affordable to the people in those places. And so you're very happy because with this group of engineers, you managed to build an incubator that is worth 4,000 euros compared to an incubator, conventional incubator, that would be worth 10,000. And you realize that, so you're very happy because this allowed you to drop considerably the cost of this incubator. But actually 4,000 is still too expensive because there is no money and there are no hospitals and maybe there is even no electricity. So incubator is not the right solution. So if we really go back to this idea of the job to be done, the job to be done is not for the baby to have an incubator. The job to be done is for the baby to be warm. And so if we question, how did our grandmothers do when they were cold? What did they do? Well, my grandmother, for example, she used hot bottles. And this is what those two students at MIT or at Stanford came up with, is a product that is called Embrace. It basically works like a hot bottle. It's worth $30 and it can be used everywhere and reused for several babies. So this is an example of going back to this idea of the job to be done. It's not about how can I improve my existing product or service. What is the exact job to be done for our customer? And if we think about our value proposition in this way, we will necessarily challenge our current value proposition, come back to the real need, to what our customer really needs. So this gives plenty of opportunities for improving the existing value proposition, but also maybe come up, invent new value proposition. So that's the first pillar of the business model. It's this idea of the value proposition, and we need to come back to the job to be done. So what can we do now on the second pillar of the business model, which is the value architecture? Remember, the value architecture is how am I organized in order to deliver this product or service in due time to my customer? And here I would like to talk about two things. The first thing is the fact that this crisis is definitely challenging our value chain. So here I put an example of a value chain. And I'm not going to spend too much time on this because there is a specific webinar on how the crisis is challenging our supply chains. But maybe one example that we can give here is that this crisis will definitely challenge what we have decided to do on our value chains. Over the past years, companies have decided to outsource a lot, outsource manufacturing, logistics, maybe sometimes outsource sales. And we have realized with this crisis how much at risk we are. We can take the extreme example, of course, of the pharmaceutical industry. This is an example of the number of plants that are approved by the FDA. And this shows that a lot of drugs are today produced in India and China for the developed world. We have put all our manufacturing at risk, and we are now lacking those products because we have outsourced them. So again, this crisis will lead to challenging those decisions that we have taken over the past years, mostly for financial reasons. Now we have this risk also, and this will definitely be a challenge in the months and in the years to come. The second challenge on the value architecture side, I think, is the fact that with this crisis, with the lockdown, we have experienced remote working. Many of us are working from home or working remotely with our teams, and we realize that this is very different from what we used to do. Of course, we have all probably done remote working before, but this is now different. And we can just imagine what is going to happen when people come back to their offices in a couple of months or a couple of weeks from now. They will challenge the way we are organized. They will challenge the way jobs and all the tasks were organized before. And they will put into question the way this was done before, because there are things that they probably enjoyed in working remotely. There are things that they probably hated working remotely. And so this will necessarily challenge our value chain, the way we are organized. Let me just take one example is what we've done at HEC. In just 1 week, we have managed to put all our classes online. This has been a tremendous change for us professors, but we have managed to do it. And to be honest, this would never have happened before the Corona crisis. And probably this will force us to challenge the way we teach and how we can teach and how we can deliver programs, or even if we're able to come back into a classroom. And this will definitely happen in all companies. And then I think working remotely from home, being locked down, will also change people in another way. Just the way it has changed our customers, it will probably also change our employees. Now, employees will challenge and will question what their job is actually there for. What is the sense of what I'm doing? How do I contribute? And this nicely leads us to our third pillar of the business model. The third pillar of the business model is the profit equation. And basically, I think what this crisis challenges more than ever before is, what is the company doing beyond profit? What is the company here for? What is the purpose of the organization beyond profit? Profit is a means to an end. Profit is not an objective in itself. And I think this crisis will challenge the purpose of organization, the raison d'être. Why is this organization existing? What is it here for? And so I think this is the way employees more and more will challenge us also about the profit and what is the purpose of the organization. We've seen during this crisis amazing examples of companies that have actually wanted to contribute to the crisis. So I guess you've all seen this example of LVMH, who has stopped its cosmetic production lines to start producing hydroalcoholic solutions. In just a matter of days, they managed to change this. Another example that you probably also have seen and that I think is very inspiring is this snorkeling mask by Decathlon. And there was one very smart guy who has invented the 3D part that he 3D printed, and that managed to transform those snorkeling masks into respirators. And of course, as soon as Decathlon has known about this, they have put all their inventories of those masks to send them to hospitals. So I think companies want to contribute. You've probably also seen those car manufacturers who have started to produce respirators. Again, just they have transformed their production line in just a matter of days. I even got an email the other day from my insurance company saying that now that we have less car accidents, what do I want to do with this money? Do I want to get it back, refund for my insurance, or do I want to give it to a charity? So companies want to contribute. And so maybe now it's time to ask you what you think. We have had all those examples, and I would like to know from you what you think about this. So maybe we can put up here the second poll, and I would like you to think and to answer those questions. So the first question is, do you think that this contribution that companies are doing is just like coronavirus washing, like we would have greenwashing on behalf of company? This is just an opportunistic public relation campaign, and nothing is really going to change. Maybe the second option is companies truly want to contribute, but just during this crisis, because that's the way to do it, then let's do it just now. Or do you think that companies will durably think about their purpose in society, about their role in society? Will they actually change? Will this change in the months and the years to come? So please think about this question. I'll just give you another minute, another couple of seconds to think about this, and to try to see what your answer is. It's pretty tight, actually, as I can see. So there's 70% of you who have voted, at least on Zoom. I know that, I'm sorry for those who follow on YouTube, you cannot vote, but you can probably have your own opinion and try to answer this question. Still some people voting? Okay. So I think we can stop now and maybe share the results. As you can see here, most of you, so 16% of you think that this is just an opportunistic PR campaign. This means that about 40% of you think that companies really truly want to contribute, but just during the crisis, and then they want to go back to normal. 44% of you, so this is just a short number, not half of you, but 44% of you think that companies will really durably rethink their role in society. And I think this is a very interesting answer, because I think that we will not go back to normal, but this also means that companies will have to think durably about their role in society. Again, people have changed, and their customers and their employees will not accept any type of behavior anymore. So let's just look at another example of a behavior that is very well known in companies. Let's just have a look with a little video here.
In the 1920s, light bulbs lasted 2,500 hours. Today, they last only 1,000 hours. What happened? A secret cartel was set up in 1924. Its goal, to reduce the lifespan of light bulbs to 1,000 hours. The first nylon stockings on the market were made to last. What happened then?
Was back to the drawing board and come out with something that was more fragile.
Welcome to the Apple Care Service and Support Line.
What is the dirty secret of millions of iPods that landed Apple in court? The answer is a hidden mechanism at the heart of the consumer society.
Planned obsolescence. The desire on the part of a consumer to own something a little newer, a little sooner than is necessary.
Planned obsolescence has defined our lives for nearly a century.
Our role in life seems to be just to consume things with credit, to borrow money to buy things we don't need.
Planned obsolescence is not only about deceiving the consumer, it also threatens the planet through a constant stream of toxic waste.
Posterity will never forgive us. Posterity will suddenly find out about the throwaway lifestyles of people in the advanced country.
So this is planned obsolescence. And planned obsolescence is the way we have designed our companies for the past 30 years. The idea makes perfect sense from a financial point of view. The idea is that if the product breaks earlier, the consumer will buy a new product, and so we'll sell more. And if we sell more, we'll make more profit. This was the underlying idea of planned obsolescence. But here again, I think this is the type of behaviors that customers are starting to challenge, that employees are starting to challenge, and that will not be possible in the coming years anymore. The idea is that this is what is sometimes called the linear economy, this idea that we take raw material out of the earth, we make a product, and then we dispose of the product. And planned obsolescence is just pushing this linear so that it goes faster. Some companies have started to go into circular economy, where circular economy, you make a product that is designed to be recycled in a very easy way. So you produce it, you use it, and then you can recycle it. And this actually makes perfect economical sense. It's not only good for the environment, it can also be good for the cost of the organization of the company, because you take back the input into the circle. A company that is very famous for doing so is a company called Desso. Desso is a Dutch company that is producing carpets for offices, as you can see on this picture. And Desso has designed its carpet in such a way that it's easy to recycle. This means that once the carpet is used, the carpet comes back to the production site, comes back and is recycled and put back into the loop. So this is what is called a circular economy, also sometimes called cradle to cradle. So, and this makes perfect economical sense, because if we look at the cost of raw material over the years, this is a study done by McKinsey. They show that the cost of basically the commodity items over the past years has dropped over the last century almost regularly But what has happened over the past 10 years is a tremendous increase in the cost of raw material. This means that not only is circular economy good for the environment, circular economy is also good for the financial, for the profit side of the business model. And this idea of decoupling the environmental impact and the financial profit is very interesting. And this is the type of business models we need to find for the coming years. So this is the type of business models that we need in the years to come to answer to those challenges of our customers and our employees. But I think there is another reason why we need to find this type of business model. And the other reason is quite simple, but also very scary, I think. Basically, we are in the middle of a sanitary crisis. This sanitary crisis has forced us to put our economy on pause. But I think there will be many sanitary crises in the years to come because of climate change. I think that climate change will have major impacts on the world, on the planet in the years to come. And probably the only way to fight against this will be, again, to stop our economies, to put our economies on pause, just the way we experience it today. So I think this should push companies to think about climate change and to become part of the solution and not only part of the problem, because it's the whole survival that is at stake. In 2015, Henri de Castries, the former CEO of AXA, a major European insurance company, said that maybe a world with +2 degrees could be insurable, but the world with +4 degrees definitely would not be. If there's so many floodings, if there are fires everywhere, if there are floodings, and all those things cannot be insured anymore. This could happen with the insurance industry, but with a lot of other industries as well. And I think this is why companies need to understand that they need to take their part in this problem today. The stakes are very high, but I think companies can be up to the challenge. If we look at the 100 world's largest economy, here is a question about how powerful companies are compared to governments. How many, if you take this list of the 100 world's largest economy, how many of them do you think are countries? And here I don't measure countries by GDP, I measure them by governmental revenue, just to make it comparable to companies. And here we measure it with sales and revenues. So what do you think? Do you think that 30% of those 100 world largest economies are countries? Or do you think then 70% companies? Would you say that it's 50-50, half of those 100 are companies and half are countries? And do you think that 70% are countries and 30% are companies? So here again, I'd like to ask all those of you who are connected via Zoom to answer this poll. To understand, again, the question here is to understand how powerful companies are. So let's see. I see that half of you have voted. Let's give a couple of more seconds, and I would like to invite all the others to think about this question. Basically, the question is how powerful are companies out of the 100 world's largest economies measured by governmental revenue and measured by revenues of the company. How many are companies and how many are countries? Okay, I think we can end the poll here and share the results. So 69% of you think that the right answer is the first answer, 30% are countries, 70% are companies. 17% of you think that it's 50-50 and 40% think that countries are bigger by 70% than companies. Actually, you're right. The vast majority of you is right. As you said, 30% out of the 100 world's largest economy, 30% are countries, 70% are companies. Let me just show you the first 30 companies and countries by size. Of course, the 10 first world economy are countries, definitely. But then you can see that Walmart, for example, measured by revenues is bigger than Spain. Another example is Volkswagen or Toyota Motors that is bigger than India. I think those numbers are very impressive to show us how powerful companies are. We can be very scared about this, but we can also be very optimistic about this, because if we manage to convince companies that they can be and they should be part of the solution rather than just being part of the problem, this can actually change the way we address not only those climate change issues, but all the other issues also linked to environmental and social issues. And I think there are some weak signals about this, that something is changing out there. The first example I want to talk about is Larry Fink, the CEO of BlackRock. I know Larry Fink is very controversial, and Larry Fink is the CEO of BlackRock, is the biggest, the world's largest asset manager. Larry Fink, or the BlackRock, is managing over $7 trillion of assets worldwide. Just to give you an order of magnitude, this is 3 times the GDP of France. So this company is amazingly powerful. And in 2020, at the beginning of this year, Larry Fink has sent a letter to all the CEOs of all the companies BlackRock has invested in, and there are many in the world, saying that this climate crisis is about to reshape business and that all CEOs should take this very seriously and contribute. So maybe you say that Larry Fink is just an opportunistic guy, and again, he's very controversial, but I see other weak signals about this. As we know, there has been a very sharp drop in the stock in the indexes of listed companies over the past weeks. What I think is very interesting to notice, and this was a very interesting study by the Financial Times, is that actually those companies that are in the ESG index actually have experienced a drop, of course, but a slower drop than the conventional index. As you know, ESG stands for environmental, social, and governance issues. So those are the companies that are part of this index are the companies that are the most virtuous on those issues that are environmental, social, and governance issues. So again, I think this is a very interesting message here, that maybe even we talked before about customers changing. We talked about employees changing, but what we see here is that investors are changing too, because investors are human beings and investors are hit by this crisis just as any other human being. So maybe to conclude, I would say that all this requires a change in mindset to understand that the climate crisis, the social crisis that we'll face in the years to come can be addressed and should be addressed by companies. Companies are increasingly powerful in the world, and they should try to become not only part of the problem, but part of the solution, and to find their purpose. And so maybe to conclude completely, I would like to show you this picture. And I would like to ask you if you see the 16 circles in this picture.
Laurence, this is Nicolas.
Yes?
Sorry to interject or interrupt your presentation, but I guess you meant 16 rectangles.
Oh, no, I meant 16 circles. 16 circles. I know that at first we all see 16 rectangles very easily, but there are also 16 circles. Look.
Sorry, only see the 16 rectangles.
Okay, so let me help you here. This is a nice example of our cognitive biases that Olivier Sibony talked about the other day in our webinar series. So here, what we can see, let me show you. Here you have 16 circles. If I go back, 16 rectangles, 16 circles. So what I wanted to finish with this, just to show you that maybe we should be able to see just beyond what we usually see. We know that right now we have a cash crisis in most of our companies, but maybe we should look beyond, what is happening right now, there are some circles. We should be able to look beyond and to prepare for the future. And I hope that this presentation can contribute to be a wake-up call for a lot of leaders to say that today it's not only about the current crash crisis, but it's also thinking ahead and changing your business model. This is why I think it's now time more than ever to reinvent your business model. Thank you very much for your attention. And I'm now very happy to take questions that you could wonder about.
Thank you very much, Laurence. I have to admit that I believe, never seen the questions coming from so many countries in the world. And the first one I'd like to pick up is a question asked by a lady in the US, Jill. And Jill said, in essence, that you say this requires definitely a change in mindset. How can we or them as leaders do this change? And what is required from a leader who would like to engage in this type of change?
Well, thank you very much, Jill. I think this is a very relevant question because this very much relies on the leader of the organization. Not only the leader, because I think we are all leaders in a way, but to all the leaders in the organization. We live in a time of uncertainty. I think more than ever, we can feel this in our body, this idea that we are really in a world of uncertainty. As you know, some call this the VUCA world, the volatile, uncertain, complex, and very ambiguous world more than ever. I think this requires a completely different posture on the behalf of the leader. I think that before, the leader was all about what we could call know-it-all. And here I'm very much inspired by Satya Nadella, who is the CEO of Microsoft. Satya Nadella says that before leader needed to be know-it-all. He needed to know everything. But right now, maybe leaders should be learn-it-all. That is, we don't know where we're going. We're in a very uncertain world. So what we need to do as leaders is to just say that we don't know and to recognize that this is uncertain and that we don't know, but that we're willing to learn with others and to learn from others. So to go from a know-it-all posture of a leader to a learn-it-all to face uncertainty. And I think that's probably very challenging because in our idea of leadership, the leader needs to know it all, but now maybe the best posture for a leader is to be able to accept that he needs to learn it all, learn it together with his teams.
Thank you very much, Laurence. We have another question coming from Sanjay in India, and Sanjay would like to know more beyond the hints that you gave us in this presentation. Are there some methodologies out there to reinvent our business model that potentially he can use, or can you advise him with something that he can use with his team?
So of course, first, I think that this is definitely something that you should do with your teams. I think this is reinventing the business model needs to be done, with a large team in the organization. We have developed at HEC, as I mentioned before, with my colleague Hélène Zikas, an approach that is called Odyssey 314, that is based on the 3 pillars of the business model that I presented before, and that proposes 14 directions in order to explore and to reinvent the business model. So this can be something, this is an approach, a kind of methodology that can be used to actually discover this. And you can check Coursera and you will find all the 14 directions on Coursera if you want to do this with your company. And I think it would be a good idea.
Thank you. And to move forward with the leadership aspect of this crisis, there's a question from Marie-Christine. She basically said that you talked about some sort of wishful thinking. Is there any research that shows that purposeful leadership is actually and positively correlated with performance?
Yeah, I have to admit that sometimes people tell me that, you know, when we present this idea of purposeful leadership, very often people say that, you know, we live somehow in la la land. It's the idea that this is just too good to be true and this is not going to happen this way in companies. But now research has started to show that purposeful organizations can actually outperform other types of organization. And again, what I've shown you just before about this ESG index is a very good example of this. There are now studies that show that purposeful driven organization with purposeful leaders are outperforming. And of course, we have a research center at HEC that is society and organization that is doing a lot of research about this topic, and especially Rodolphe Durand has published a lot about this. So this
Thank you. I still have to, yes. We will send the link into the follow-up email. I still have two questions, if I may. The first one is a question which is asked by Marzier. I'm not so sure that I'm pronouncing well the name, but the question is, from your point of view, what are the business that are completely resilient?
What are the businesses that are completely resilient? That's a very good but tough question. I think the businesses that are resilient are those that are able to constantly reinvent their business model. That is, sometimes before we thought that business models reinvention should only happen once, but now we more and more realize that this needs to happen all the time. And to become resilient, we actually have to reinvent things all the time. So being resilient is probably making sure that you constantly challenge the job to be done, that you constantly challenge your value chain, and that you constantly challenge the purpose of your organization. And I think this will lead you to resilience.
Okay, thank you. And the last one, maybe, which probably ain't going to be the easiest one, which is we are now deeply in a very challenging world and an uncertain world. So how can what would be your advice to properly redefine the business model within this uncertain environment?
So can you please repeat your question, Nicolas? Just
sorry for that.
Yeah.
It's just making, I guess I'm translating, making the connection between the uncertainty in which we are living now and reinventing the business models. What are your advice that you can give us?
Well, again, we are in an uncertain world, so we're not able to foresee what is going to happen. So we constantly need to think about our business model, and we constantly need to reinvent it, because we will never be sure where we will get at. So we need to be ready to constantly question the value proposition, the value architecture, and the profit equation. And uncertainty is not going to change. Uncertainty is there for long and to last. So this is a process we need to do over and over. Okay, so uncertainty is now a regular business parameter. Exactly, more than ever. You have seen, maybe you're familiar with this VUCA acronym that I mentioned before. VUCA is an acronym that has been coined by the US military at the end of the 80s to describe the post-Soviet world, where basically we don't really know what is going to happen, and that where the enemy of one day can be another enemy tomorrow. And so this is exactly what characterizes our business environment today: uncertainty. And so again, I think the leader needs to assess that he's uncertain, that he or she doesn't know, and at the same time to reinvent, to learn together, to learn it all, to learn together, and to reinvent this business model constantly with his or her teams.
Thank you very much, Laurence. And I want to apologize to all the attendees because obviously we cannot take all questions. There are hundreds of them. So thank you very much. And I'm happy to hand it over to Florent for the closure.
Yes, thank you very much, Laurence and Nicolas. HEC Paris would like to thank you for taking part in this conference, and we hope you can join us for other webinars. Have a good night.